1 p.m. and I'd like to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This evening, TJ, would you please give us the invocation?
Yes. Lord, we come this evening with humble hearts and bowed heads. We come, Lord, thanking you for the day that you've given us. We come thanking you, Lord, and asking that you bridle our tongues and corral our hearts, Lord, in love. Lord, we ask that you bless this council, that we work together as a team. Guide us in all that we do for the community and the city. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Next up is the Pledge of Allegiance to the United States flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Texas flag. Honor the
Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
There were no citizen or visitor information or questions this evening or anything to read. So we'll move to the first item on the agenda, consideration of possible action. Number 1, consideration of possible action regarding appointment of municipal court judge and associate municipal court judge. Action was tabled at 12/8/20 city council meeting.
Okay, this is an item that's required by the city's code of ordinances. These terms follow along with the term of the mayor. Robert Rosenquist has been currently serving as a municipal court judge, and Gary Scott serving as the associate municipal court judge. This item was considered and was tabled on December 8th, 2020, to allow staff the opportunity to explore whether the opportunity was there for precinct number 1, Justice of the Peace, Wayne Mack, to also serve in the position of municipal court judge. During the time period between the meetings, I spoke with Judge Mack. He had indicated that he would definitely be interested in working with the city. I had 2 separate conversations with him. In addition, he also had he and their court administrator, Kimberly Duckett, had a productive conversation. So, if if council wants to appoint Wayne Mack to the position instead of Judge Rosenquist, that's certainly something that I believe staff can support, and recommend going that way if that's council's desire. In addition, I did speak on Friday to Robert Rosenquist. He has supplied a letter of resignation that would take effect upon his replacement. So that clears out any question of the position auto-renewing. So, he's providing that in the case that council wants to go a different direction. I do know from talking to him, my understanding was he was also prepared to continue in this position.
So he still is interested in staying on. Judge Rosenquist is?
That was my understanding, but he also supplied that letter of resignation to allow free council to make the decision either way. I mean, with the wording of that, if it takes effect upon his replacement, obviously if he is not replaced, well, then it doesn't take effect.
So if Judge Mack come on with anything in the court, administrators and all of those, Christie and Kimberly, would they still be in? Or would he bring his own people?
We would continue to function as we're functioning now. The difference would be what the duties that Robert Rosenquist has been filling, those would then be filled by Judge Mack in the same capacity. If there are other changes that might, there could be other changes that might be made down in the future, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. What we're talking about is essentially the position that's been fulfilled by Robert Rosenquist in that matter, and whether or not to reappoint him or appoint Wayne Mack and operate in that same fashion.
But Mack he can bring his own staff in if he wants to. You said down the road, but that could be 30, 60 days?
Well, that's not my intent to say it that way. What I was saying is, if there might be other changes we might look at making, that'd be something that we could discuss down the road. And what I mean by down the road is much longer down the road. We have our budget set for the fiscal year. We have our plan in place to operate a certain way. I wasn't looking at, from my position of city administrator, nor from my conversations with Kimberly Duckett, the department head leading the court, of making any significant structural changes during this fiscal year. But, if we're working with Judge Wayne Mack, anything that he's doing in his current capacity at the precinct office, if there might be ways that we can find ways to make improvements, whether in terms of efficiency or cost, then I think those would be changes we would look at implementing in the future.
Can we ask Kimberly what she thinks if there would be changes, if that would be welcomed? Because I wasn't aware that there would be changes if we changed the judge.
Well, that's our intent. Is the only changes, if we did change to Judge Mack, would be he would operate in the capacity the same as Robert Rosenquist is operating. But Kimberly, if you can hear us and would like to comment on that, you're on mute, but you're certainly welcome to do so.
What was the question again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear the first question. I think TJ was speaking, or Mr. Cronin.
What's your feelings if Wayne Mack were to bring, later on down the road, if we were to appoint him and he brought his own staff, how would that make you and Christy, what does that do to y'all?
Well, that could essentially push me and or Christy out of our positions. So I would highly not be in favor of him bringing in his own staff.
Well, does he have to
I've been in the court for over 5 years and in my position for about 2.5 years. So I'm not going to jeopardize my position for appointment of a judge when I can clearly function with Judge Rosenquist.
So is that the judge's call or is that our call? And because he's working on behalf of the city.
As far as bringing in their own staff?
Yes.
Can I step in here for a minute?
I'm sorry?
Go ahead, Chief.
Can I step in here for a minute?
Oh, yeah, sure.
No, that wouldn't be his function. He has a staff that he uses down in Precinct 1. Some of the changes that we would be looking for if Judge Mack came in is right now, and these are the things we can do with Rosen as well. Mack has a pretty good juvenile program, but Precinct 1 also gets all the revenue and the funds from any citations that's handed out at the school. And we've got schools that are clearly in this jurisdiction that we're not getting any funds from because they're all being handled in his court down there. If he comes here, we're looking to have those funds and have those citations in here into our court. But as far as our staff changing, that's not that would clearly be up to the city and not up to judge.
I was hoping. I thought the answer.
Yeah, if I may, this is Alan. When cities appoint the municipal judges, the judges can vary from time to time, but the cities employ the staff, so that typically does not change.
Okay.
So Alan, if Judge Mack was to come in, he would not have the authority to make a change here at the local level.
That is correct.
And that's what I think prefer.
And if so, it would have to come before the council, right?
The council would have that change, yes.
Yeah. And that's where I'm saying that there might be things that we look at in the future, but I would consider any changes like that to be well down the future. First we would have to see, in my opinion, how that relationship would work with Judge Mack. Get him and the city staff opportunities to work together, become more familiar with each other. And at that point, allow him and Kimberly, who runs the court over there, for the city, the opportunity to figure out how any changes might best work for the future, bring those to me as city administrator, and ultimately then potentially bring those to city council.
And are there any concerns that Mack is not an attorney of law in regards to legal action for the city itself? I mean, Rosenquist is a degreed attorney that sits and holds a bar. So what are our liabilities for a city? Alan, you look confused. So I'm like, isn't Mac involved in several litigations right now with the county in regards to things happening in his court? And are we then opening that Pandora's box for the city of Montgomery?
So I'm not that familiar with Judge Mack, so I couldn't speak to what he may be involved with, but you know, regardless of whether he's a licensed attorney, as long as he meets the qualifications for appointment to the judgeship for the municipal judge, that's not a problem. You know, some people like to have attorneys as the judges, the feeling that they may have a little bit more knowledge of the law, but other individuals, you know, have picked it up over years of service too.
It's of any consequence. We've had Judge Rosenquist since I've been mayor, and it came to my attention that we had been overpaying him by $500 a month, and he knew it and didn't say anything. And so I have a problem with that. But if we were to keep him, that's great too. I just wanted to bring up that point.
Someone mentioned that to me, Sarah, but I was told that in a council meeting that his pay was increased by $500 a month, that it was authorized by the city. And when addressed about it, he immediately suggested during the pandemic to go down to the $1,000 a month instead of the $1,500.
I don't recall adjusting his pay. That, I'm not saying that didn't, but I don't recall. I remember being told that we were paying him for and that he knew that that was what he and Jack agreed upon, or the council agreed upon. He was getting paid $1,500 instead of $1,000. That was the actual agreement, and accepted those checks for quite a long time and didn't say anything about it.
How many how many court nights do we have now?
We've been running about twice a month for court nights, and sometimes it's once a month.
And Richard, Mr. Wayne Mack said that he would be able to make both of those courts.
I don't have my schedule. I don't have my schedule made out for 2021 for my new court night. Work according to Judge Rosenquist, and for the payment issue with Judge Rosenquist, that was authorized by the previous court administrator and Jack on his payment.
Okay. Did they say Ms. Duncan and Ms. Reed had visited with Judge Mack? Had they sit down and talk with him? Hello?
Kimberly, that question was regarding, was pointed to you.
Only I visited with Judge Mack on a phone conversation, but that was it, not Ms. Reed. And it was just for him to let me know that he was interested in the position.
I wanted to ask you a question.
You know, based on the
motion that we reappoint the same two judges and we leave it as it is.
I'd like to make a motion to reappoint Municipal Court Judge Robert Rosenquist and Associate Municipal Court Judge Gary Scott.
And
Second.
Did you get that? It's been seconded, correct? Julie, you were the second?
Sure.
It has been moved that we appoint, keep the Municipal Court Judge Gary Scott and Robert Rosenquist as our Associate Municipal Court Judge. This motion is debatable, amendable, requires majority vote. It is open for discussion.
It was the other way around, Sarah. It was reappoint Municipal Court Judge Robert Rosenquist and Associate Municipal Court Judge Gary Scott.
Okay. Thank you, Tom. Are you ready for the question, Council?
Certainly.
All those in favor of reappointing Robert Rosenquist as the municipal court judge, as well as Gary Scott, say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, the motion carries, and we will continue to appoint Robert Rosenquist as our associate municipal court judge along with Gary Scott. All right, next item of business on your agenda, item number 2. Consideration of possible action regarding acceptance of the bid and award of the construction contract for water plant number 3 improvements.
Okay. This item was originally brought to council in September 2020. A large part of the project scope of work was the replacement of the 100,000 gallon ground storage tank with a 210,000 gallon ground storage tank, which would match the other tank in operation at that facility. The decision was made to postpone awarding the construction contract at that time to make a better determination of the condition of the interior of the tank and try to see if there might be a possibility of recoating the tank to extend its life, its service life for a safe extended period of time. After reviewing the inspection results, the recommendation of the city engineer, city staff, and TORC is to proceed with replacing the existing tank with a new larger tank per the original scope of work. The engineer's memo explains in greater detail. I know the engineer is on the line. Before I ask the engineer to speak, I will just add in here, I also took the time to tour the inside of that tank, and it's, I'm part of the ones who concur with this. I think if several years ago the decision were made to recoat that tank, it might have done some good then. But as it is the decision was made that time to put us on the path to where we are today towards replacing that tank. While we could put a coating inside of that tank, I think there's no guarantee it would hold, and things like that tend to go out at the worst possible time. And I think we would run the risk, if we didn't replace the tank, that we would be looking at the potential of a tank failure. And if that occurs at the wrong time of year, we could be going through the entire summer on a drought contingency plan, which really I don't think would be palatable to most citizens. With that said, I'll ask Chris to take up with his memo.
Sure thing. So just to back up a few steps, kind of, because I know we have some new council members and some to where we got, but this project is funded through the Texas Water Development Board. So it's a loan that the city has. So the funds are in the bank, are ready to use for this project. Back in 2015, 2016, when the issues of this tank started to be noted, the decision was made by council at the time to not put money toward this tank for 2 reasons. 1, it was already starting to show those in pretty bad shape. And 2, just the size of it and knowing the needs and the growth of the city, that larger tank was going to be needed in the future. So saving the $50,000, $60,000 then and replacing it with the larger tank in the future, because that capacity was going to be needed. So there's a handful of documents that y'all have, and then what I sent out secondly. So what is in your packet that you received is our memo from August when the bids were received, going through the alternates and then the sizes. So the one I would kind of want to point to is where we're talking about is, so on the bottom of page 5 of your packet, there is called base bid plus alternate 2, which is what the recommendation is. And that shows where we are in terms of ESFC capacity, so an equivalent connection, or actually a connection capacity count. And it varies depending on what item you're looking at per TCEQ rules. So where we are today, our limiting factors of our ability to serve water is our hydromatic tanks, followed in by our ground storage tank. So what's in the project, and we all agreed upon, was the 15,000 gallon hydro tank, which gets us from our 875 connection count up to 2,500 connections. And that's just based on rule that says if you have 30,000 or greater, you can do 2,500 connections per TCEQ requirements. So once that was out, you then look at the ground storage tank capacity, which you're at 2175 connections. And if after this project, you have to 2,725 connections, so additional 500 connections for that tank. So kind of going through the items that y'all have in your packet, you have a copy of an inspection report that was done just from earlier this year, or excuse me, from October, where we're talking about going inside the tank. And so what you'll see through here, I'm now on page 13 of your report, is photos of the interior of the tank, kind of all those rust spots that you see throughout the bottom and through the walls. Some of those actually on the floor go through the tank. So as you're walking around, you would have water shooting up from the void that was underneath, and that carries out kind of throughout the bottom. So we inspected it. The next day we had the tank manufacturers come out and inspect it as well to give their opinion on options and alternatives, and then ultimately circled back up with staff and Torque to come to ultimate recommendation. What I sent out secondly, just for comparison's sake, I sent out photos from the interior of the same tank from 2016. Again, nothing really to note, just more of, you can see the differences that the past 5 years have made in the interior of that tank. And then also there's a second memo dated November 19th that I sent out right before the meeting. And this is really, so from the outcome of the meeting that this was tabled and the follow-up conversations with Torque, these were the items that were requested to be reevaluated to make sure that the recommendation that we had was sufficient. And so this is what it walks through. So I'm going to hit the highlights, and I don't want to take more time than is necessary, but I want to make sure everyone understands. So one item in the scope of work was cathodic protection, which is just a electric means or a chemical reaction means of protecting against corrosion. So the recommendation was to take that out of the scope of work. We're in agreement with that. There will be a slight deduct change order to do that work, or to take that out. The reason we're comfortable is we're not going back with the same material of tank. We're not going back with a galvanized tank, because what we have found is, not to worry with the details, but the galvanizing process changed back in the early 90s. Ever since then, tanks have been having more and more issues of galvanizing. It's got to the point where now the galvanizers are not warranting their work. So the tank manufacturer has to warranty it, but the person he used to galvanize it, which there's only, I think, 1 or 2 firms or businesses in Houston that will do it, will no longer warranty it. So that says a lot right there that your galvanized tank isn't warrantyable. So we're going with a factory coated tank. That way it has a protective coating on it. As that coating tends to wear out over time, which is why we inspect it regularly, you go in, you do a blast and you recoat, so you keep that coating on there to protect against corrosion going forward. One of the items that was in there as an alternate was an additional booster pump at the plant. That is not our limiting vector. And so, there's not a lot of cost savings of doing it now versus doing it as a separate project. So the recommendation is still to not go forward with the booster pump at this time. We did agree to go forward, as we get forward in the future and we reevaluate, see where that is best served, size, location, if it's at a new water plant on the west side of town, if it's water plant 2, water plant 3, but ultimately not doing any of that work right now, which is about a $90,000 addition to the contract. Moving on to page 2 of what I sent on earlier was the ground storage tank. So this is kind of what I was referring to earlier with the photos and the condition of the tank. So, we went back and we looked at a handful of options that were requested. As one, instead of, because this tank that's being proposed is a larger footprint, so it's a larger diameter tank, so it requires breaking out the existing foundation and redoing some on-site piping and putting the new tank in place. So we looked at, could we utilize the same foundation and make the tank taller? The issue with that is you then have tanks of different heights. And they function on a open line, so they're connected together to equalize. And if you have tanks of different heights, they're not going to function as they should, or you're never going to be able to use that additional capacity in your taller tank because it will just flow out the top of the other one. we looked at, how do we repair the tank that's there? So what we found is the tank is made up of a metal floor and then 3 metal rings that go around to make up the sides. The bottom 2 rings in the floor are all needed to be replaced. So we got a price from the manufacturer to replace those rings, and it was about $100,000, $94,000 to $100,000 to do just the replacement. So you don't end up with the tank any larger. You just have replacing it with the same size that it is for those pieces. And the cost of a new tank of the same size was about $120,000. So it didn't make sense to try to fix it versus just replacing it with the same size. So we then said, okay, well, what's the cost difference between the same size tank and the new tank that was bid? And the difference is about $313,000 after you include the foundation work, et cetera. So we said, what does that 110,000 gallons get you? So that 110,000 gallons gets you another 500 connections or 550 connections. If you take an average home value of $250,000, you take that down to taxable value to the city, that's $550,000 a year in taxable revenue from those 500 homes that you can construct, because now you have that capacity on the ground. And, put this in terms of the camera development that we're under feasibility study now, that's 517 homes. If you didn't have this larger tank, you would be right up at your capacity after that builds out. And just as a reminder, those home prices there between $400,000 and $500,000 is what they're estimating on those lots. So, kind of taking it down to the options and the monetary value of it, we felt that it was most advantageous to go ahead and do this now, because the tank is in a condition that we can spend a little bit of money and get us further down the road. And, if you're already paying $120,000, $125,000 to replace the tank you have, for that $300,000 extra to get, another 500 homes on the ground, it gets you a lot further down the road, was our thought process. So, what else is in this project? And I forgot to mention this earlier. There's also the second cooling tower on the site. So right now, the water that comes out of the Catahoula well comes out hot. It goes through a cooling tower and it's on a recirculation. So it continually, 24 hours a day, circulates through the system to cool it. This puts in a second cooling tower unit. So now it will go out of the well, get cooled, and then go into the tanks and will not have to be recirculated. So there's going to be some efficiency costs, and also just you get better cooling out of double the capacity of the cooling towers. So the other thing that we did talk about that was mentioned at the council meeting was a conversion to a different disinfectant, being a liquid bleach versus the chlorine gas that's currently being used at the 2 facilities. And, the main thing is obviously the safety concern of having chlorine gas cylinders in near proximity. So we did put together a couple cost options, and we discussed that with staff and Torque. And the intention is that this is something that it doesn't get included in this project. Again, it's a standalone project. We're not doing work here that would save us, from doing this later. But that is something that, it is high on the priority list to get done in 2021 as budget sales tax revenue comes in and gets kind of fit into the budget. Is there any questions on scope of the project or the why or recommendation? So, we have been in contact with the contractor. I talked to him earlier today. He's been holding his bids since August, since he bid the project. He wasn't required to hold them this long. He has been able to talk to all of his suppliers and have them hold their prices, as long as we can take action on this in this fiscal year and get him a letter of intent. That way he can move forward. And he told me today he's already actually ordered the large ground storage tank, but he was able to, if this fell through, return it at no cost. So really tonight, it's either we move forward with this contractor or we'll have to rebid the project come next year.
Chris, what's the lifetime of the tank? Is it 10 years, 25 years, or 3 year?
It should be 25 years, but if you take care of it and you do a efficient coating or sufficient coating on it and you inspect it and keep it up, you can get much longer out of that. We have, steel tanks that have been installed in the early 70s that are still in use today, and we're able to keep them going just because that, one, it's a coated tank, and they recoat it every 7 to 10 years. They touch it up when they see corrosion spots, and they're able to continue to extend that life of that tank.
What's the age of this tank you're talking about?
This tank was installed in 2007, so it's only 13 years. So, and the odd thing is, a couple questions that came up was like, well, how are these different? Because the other ground storage tank we inspected earlier in 2020, and it has not seen issues at all. It was installed later, so it was installed 7 years later. It was a 2014 install, 2013, but it is not having these corrosion issues that this tank is.
Same material?
Same material, same manufacturer, different dates. Maybe there's a different sub that did the galvanizing work, or a different, a batch that day. It's hard to say. What this also does, this project at this scope, it gets the city to a point where we have now the capacity on the ground that the next decision is the elevated water tank and where that goes in water plant 3. And based on our projections, this gets us through the next until 2025, 2026 to really start diving into those decisions. Again, it's always going to be based on growth, and if more development comes along, that'll change timeline. But it gets us a lot further down the road within staying with the tank size we have.
Is there a lemon law?
I wish. No, obviously there's a manufacturer's warranty and things like that, but those have expired, and it's no one seems to really even the manufacturers say this is one of the worst tanks that he's seen, and no one really had a good reason why that tank, when the other tank is fine, was having and showing these issues. So.
Okay.
Chris, what's the lead time on this project?
So we'll be working with him on schedule. Lead time is that the contracts will be done as quickly as possible. If he's already ordered his tank, maybe there's a chance we'll get the tank completed before the summer. If not, we're going to work with him to bring back to you to recommend adding additional days to his contract to delay the tank portion until the fall, but get all the rest of the work done so we don't have facilities offline during summer. But the calendar days he bid were 270 calendar days from the notice to proceed. And based on the timeline to get Water Development Board to approve the contracts, likely that notice will be going out at the end of January for him to get started, and then 270 days from there. That's what.
Okay.
Hey, Chris, on that deal, I guess when he accept the bid or we finalize it, he'll probably give you a schedule that we have target dates on it and goals.
Yes. No. So after the contract is finalized and he issues notice to proceed, he's required to submit a detailed schedule as his first submittal requirement to go through. And so we'll be talking. Yeah.
Say if you pull that tank up and that foundation under that is bad, would that be a rebid to redo that concrete slab, or that's all included in putting
that's
down?
That's already included. So since we're going with the larger diameter, we're already going to rip out that slab and re-pour a new footprint for that tank.
And under that tank, they're going to put some type of coating?
I need to go back and look at the specs to see what type of seal there is between the concrete and the metal. I do not remember.
Oh, okay.
But I can let you know.
Yeah. Because, I've seen them.
Right, if it gets moisture underneath. I know, obviously we have a gasket around the outside edge, but from what type of prep is done to the surface between the bottom of the tank and the concrete, I need to go back and look.
Okay.
And Chris, you mentioned the camera development. Are you saying that this tank is going to feed the camera development, or you're just saying it could feed that large of a new footprint of homes, 500 homes?
That's what I'm saying. So right now the camera development is still preliminary, but I think that even if this current developer goes away, there's a lot of interest in that tract, and there's a lot of other tracts that 500 homes could be used up on. And
Does
in that,
Water
that's not
Plant
including commercial.
Does Water Plant 3 feed that area?
It does.
Okay.
It does. So how our system works is we have the 2 water plants and it feeds the entire city. So they're interconnected. All the pipes are interconnected. We don't have different zones for different plants. And the city also already owns property off of Emma's Way by Hills of Town Creek for a future water plant on that side of town, just depending on how development occurs to make sure we have enough pressure.
I thought the whole loop wasn't completely finished. And so that's why I was like, that means it goes 3/4 of the way around the loop before it gets to Camera property, because that loop is not finished.
Correct. So what's under what will be part of the camera study, and so we're actually working on the model now to show how it's going to work. But so there's a water line on Old Plantersville at Womack Cemetery that they would initially probably tie into for the first 30, 40 homes. After that, and that's what we're determining now, is they would continue and close the loop all the way back to 105 by the high school. So you would have a water line loop that would go all the way from 105 at Old Dobbin Plantersville over to City Hall and Old Plantersville and 105 to close that water line loop to serve them and everyone else that's in that area.
But hadn't we previously discussed, and maybe prior to me coming on board, that there wasn't even enough pressure on that line to supply 30 or 40 homes? Like, I know I'm going to throw this up a bunch, but I'm on that loop.
Right.
There's not enough pressure on that line to come down Womack Cemetery to supply my house, much less 30 or 40 more homes.
Right. So the project that's ongoing now that we'll have a contractor moving on site in a few months is upsizing the water line down 105 Pond Street and 149. So right now, how the system is set up is there's large lines kind of north of Berkeley, and there's large lines west of City Hall, and then there's smaller diameter lines in the middle. And so that project has already been awarded, the contract signed. The contractor was just waiting to get through the holidays before he started to upsize that line to improve the flow and the pressure that then kind of branches off down Old Plantersville and then ultimately the other direction.
And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to change it back to camera. I make a motion that we accept the agenda item as slated for Water Plant 3 improvements.
Second.
It is moved and seconded that we accept the item as presented. This motion is debatable, amendable, and requires a majority vote. It is open for discussion. All those in favor of accepting the item as presented, say aye.
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 Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The motion carries, and we will accept the item as presented. Okay. Item number 3 on your agenda. Sorry, my agenda has gone off my page. I apologize. Item number 3 on your agenda: consideration of possible action regarding acceptance of the Town Creek watershed study.
Okay, you have the engineer's memo attached, which provides a recent timeline of the study and the recommendation. And we have Bill Cotlin from BGE on here tonight. His firm is the one who's done the study for this item. This is to put together the work, or a scope of work and recommendation, so that we can put that to the task of the money that is in the GLO grant for drainage. And then with that, I'll just ask Bill if you kind of give a brief kind of overview of what you've presented before, as well as what you went off and did as a result of council's request since then for council.
Sure. And Chris's memo gives a pretty good overview, but to just kind of give you an idea, what we were looking at was what we call Town Creek Tributary Number 1, which is the part of Town Creek that splits off and goes north and crosses 149 and then crosses MLK headed towards 1097 going north. And the reason for focusing on that piece was because the grant money was related to lower to middle class properties and doing flood mitigation there. So our goal was to try to reduce the flood elevations along that tributary, but we also looked at Town Creek south of that in order to make sure that whatever improvements we did along the tributary did not add to any other problems downstream. And so we looked at 3 alternatives initially, alternatives 1, 2, and 3, and basically the difference between those alternatives was that where we're crossing 149 in alternative 3, we were adding a couple of more 54-inch pipes there. In alternative 1, we added the box culverts there to make that a little wider. In alternative 2, we actually put a bridge over the creek there. And we looked at the results of those and did cost estimates for alternative 1 and 2. And those are summarized on your graph there. We picked the one that was the middle with the box culverts, which was a total estimated cost of $1.4 million. In addition to the box culverts, was cleaning out the Town Creek to the west side of 149, between 149 and MLK, the tributary of Town Creek, I mean, and adding a detention pond just south of 149 or just east of 149. The detention pond would be to basically replace the storage in the creek that was being removed by lowering the water surface. And so we analyzed that, and it worked pretty well to lower those water surfaces in there significantly. It still, you know, at times will flood and go over 149 because of the elevation of 149. When we presented that alternative, council asked us to look at 2 other things. One was to, rather than doing an improvement to the culvert crossing 149, to look at doing detention ponds upstream, maybe bigger detention ponds upstream on the tributary. And the other was to evaluate annual maintenance costs. And so we looked at the alternative. We put together a detention pond up next to the school up there on MLK, pretty decent sized detention pond, and it really didn't do very much to improve any of the flooding along there. And then we also looked, as I said, at the estimated annual cost. We had basically the same for alternative 1 and 2. Both of them had a detention pond and a channel section that together were about 5 acres. And so I got a bid to basically to do a comprehensive maintenance program on the 5 acres, including mowing on a regular basis and fertilizing and reseeding it in the wintertime. And then coming in every year to remove silt that might have caught up in there. And that was about $20,000 a year to do a pretty comprehensive maintenance program. And then I added another $1,500 a year to go into the culvert once a year and pull out brush or tree limbs or anything that was in there. So you wouldn't be maintaining the culverts itself, because those would be tech stock culverts. But you might want to spend the money to go and clear them out occasionally so that they don't get plugged up in case tech stock doesn't do that. So that's kind of the high end of annual maintenance would be that $21,500. And so, you know, we're recommending that you move forward with alternative number 1, which is the box culverts and the detention pond and the channel improvements. You know, I'm sure that you can find probably a cheaper annual cost of maintenance than what I got a bid for. But anyway, I'd love to answer any questions you have. And if you'd like to see some exhibits, I've got some exhibits I could share with you if I share them on the screen.
Bill, I had the pleasure of walking that property, and I believe Rebecca Huss brought up detention pond north of there to stop the water there, because there's tons that come down. That property is disintegrated. Lefebvre has, and I see that you put that on alternate, other alternate, but there's no consideration of cost and all that and where that would go. Or I think she was spot on, trying to stop water up top versus when it's already here.
So we evaluated that, Mayor, and basically the improvement was so minor that it didn't do much good. And let me explain why that is. I kind of had an idea before we ran the model that we might find that. The way those models work and the way rain works in a creek is that there's two factors. There's the conveyance in the creek, how much water moves down the creek, and then there's the storage in the creek. And so as rain falls, over a pattern, over a period of time, the water comes into the creek, and then the water level in the creek comes up, and that's storage. And based on how much it comes up, then water leaves, and that's the discharge. And so you kind of keep routing through those three items, the storage and the inflow and the discharge. And that's how that computer model works. I know that's probably more technical than you want, but when you have as much water as coming down that creek as what it is, in order to change the flow rate of that water, you have to store a whole lot of water because it's not just about the amount at any one time, it's the amount over a period of 12 hours, that you have to like catch, you have to cut the top off that peak over a long period of time. And that was just the amount of storage we were able to get was not enough to make a significant difference. Whereas by increasing the conveyance, which is what we're doing when we increase the box culverts under the road there where it's constricted, we allow that water to move on down. And so it makes a lot of difference in the water level because now it's not getting basically blocked up. And so since that was our goal, was to get the water level to go down, doing a big detention pond upstream just didn't do that. And that does work on a smaller scale with a smaller acreage, but the watershed that's coming down that stream is just so big, we would have to do just a massive detention pond in order to reduce the flooding. And we looked at the biggest pond we could fit, in that undeveloped area, taking out all those trees in there and putting I think it was a 6 foot deep pond, and it didn't even touch the water surface of the floods.
So we met, Dave, Richard, and I, and Catherine met with Philip last week to go over the study, talk about options, and got him on board. And what Bill has in here, so there is an increase downstream, but that's what the pond does downstream, is to help mitigate that impact. So there's more going underneath the bridge. Now the downstream pond between 149 and Pleas Morgan helps to mitigate that impact. And what we talked with Philip is, let's find a way, as he's going through his plans and the city's going through their plans, to see how we can work together and make sure that Pleas Morgan's protected and that doesn't get further issues down there. So this, what the memo that you have in the study, we went over with Philip last week, and Richard and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but I felt that we had Philip's consent kind of in agreement with the scope of work that we had proposed.
Out of this work that's going on, Chris, was that part of that first stage when y'all cleaned out that Town Creek Bridge? Was that part of that same deal?
No.
When Tex died? Oh, that's different.
Different.
Oh, okay. All right. Have you heard anything about the rock?
I've not. Still waiting. I'll ask them again. I know I'm not going to get a response until probably next year at this point, but I will continue to ask to see when they're.
Yeah, I got to keep asking. I got to keep asking about it.
I know you do. You drive by it every day. So,
yeah.
Still not there. Still not there. And I drive by it every time. Oh man, DJ's gonna ask me because it's still not there.
Yeah. All right.
So what we're looking for tonight, so obviously it's just council's concurrence with the alternate to go forward with, and where this goes now is it goes between the GLO and TxDOT to start ironing out the details and get this approved to be put into a project. So now we have the scope. We've had initial conversations with TxDOT about the culverts and the crossings, and just have some follow-up now. Once this is decided, to then put together the plan of action to kind of address the projects listed in Bill's report, being the creek clean out, the culverts, and the detention pond. And then also the land acquisition for the detention pond is a lot of what we talked about with Philip and the people who own the surrounding area that the pond is going to impact.
Can you remind me, did we put out a bid for this?
For the study?
Yes. Or
Yes.
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 Okay.
There's a RFQ for the study, and then there's a RSL RFQ for the entire GLO project engineering.
Okay.
And just for clarification, the estimates that we're seeing of the 1.4 million, the 1.7 million on alternate 1 and 2, the entire financial burden of that would be the city of Montgomery, correct? TxDOT's not bearing any of that burden in regards to crossing 149?
So the entire grant that the city received was 2.3 million. There's 3 projects that are currently in that, between this one, some other drainage and sanitary sewer improvements along MLK, McGinnis, Baja Road, that area, and then also an additional generator. So one thing that, when we talk to TxDOT, there's a likelihood that if TxDOT took this on, if we were to convince them, it wouldn't be done until 2026, at least the culvert crossing, which then you've done a channel clean out and you maybe dug a detention pond that really serves no use until those culverts are done. But that's definitely, kind of the next step, is working with them to see if there's a way to, share in either sharing the cost or sharing the scope to get this accomplished, and that it makes sense on both sides. So the number you see is all within the grant that the city has.
Including the other 2 projects, you're still within the 2.3 million grant?
It's going to be close. So that's one thing we're going to reevaluate to see if there's, a order priority. Ours is we have a generator at Water Plant 3. This is just an additional generator to power some of the equipment not powered by the current. So our order of importance is this project for the drainage improvements, followed by the sewer and other drainage improvements in the same area, and then the generator. So if something needs to fall off, it might be the generator. But again, we're going to kind of go through and see what options and kind of ways to restructure it to get the most amount done that we can out of the grant.
And Chris, do you think that any of the damage on Water Plant 3 could have been caused from the overflow of this creek that runs right there by it, like the watershed of that, or no?
No.
No, okay.
Move to accept the Town Creek watershed study as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded that we accept the Town Creek watershed study as presented. This motion is debatable, amendable, and requires majority vote. It is open for discussion. All those in favor of accepting the Town Creek watershed study as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it, the motion carries, and we will accept the Town Creek watershed study as presented. Item number 4, update on MUD 160 Lefebvre property.
Thank you. This item I added as just an informational item. I want to help make sure everyone's on the same page, because there will be an item related to MUD 160, coming up in one of the next 2 meetings that will probably need some attention, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page. And where possible, I hate to put something on the agenda to be heard the first time and say I need something passed. And so that's why I want to give some background to this and what we're looking at the moment. So you'll hear this again in the future, but we'll be closer to a recommendation for council at that time in the future. Montgomery County MUD 160 was previously approved as an in-city MUD by the City of Montgomery City Council. The land is in early development process, and this area will include approximately 175 single-family homes, and that number is subject to change as the area continues its planning. As part of the MUD process, the developer will need to set up a residence for voters that will be part of it, and that's part of the regular MUD startup process. Yeah, and we're currently working with Philip Lefebvre in terms of how that will take place. Typically, that's often done by moving a mobile home type trailer onto the property, establishing a residence that would need to be in place full utilities, full connections, and then somebody living there for up to 6 to 9 months. At the moment, the only place to locate that is essentially going to put that right in a highly visible area, right across from the Waterstone area. And so it's going to be expensive for Philip. It's also going to be highly visible and probably have a number of people who are probably unhappy looking at that because it'll need a variance from council to locate that trailer. But it's also, it's just going to be something that will be somewhat unsightly in some people's opinion. Philip is looking at another option of potentially annexing another piece of land he owns into MUD 160. That other piece of land is in the city already. He's considering annexing it into MUD 160. It has a residence that's already on it, but needs some rehab work. It'd be something that he could move on more quickly and cost effectively. This is something we're still in discussion with them. And so I just wanted to let council know primary is a possibility for this area, that this item might come up. What you're seeing brought up in the blue area is the current boundaries, of Montgomery County MUD 160, within the city. The area there is basically bounded by 1097 to the north, Ples Morgan to the west, Lone Star Parkway to the south, and Buffalo Springs to the east. It's, as I said, it's something we're working with Philip on. We'll be bringing that back. Either of these is going to need action by council, whether we would consent to annexation of another piece of land owned by the developer into that MUD, or a variance to allow, essentially a mobile home trailer, to act as a residence for an extended period, so that they can achieve the requirements for their MUD election. So, as I said, there is no action requested with this, but I just wanted to brief you and bring you kind of up to date with where we are now, because you'll be hearing this again in the future. If you have any questions related to that part of the MUD process, I can either be happy to take those now, either for myself or Alan if it's more technical, or you're certainly free to reach out to us, during the weeks between the council meetings.
Richard, we don't have enough water supply for that to be city supplied water. That's why they have to have a MUD.
Well, the MUD, in this particular case, the MUD is a developer vehicle so that they can get reimbursement for their investments. The city would be supplying the utilities for this. And so an in-city MUD is something that is commonly used in a number of areas. It hasn't been commonly used in Montgomery in the past, but it is used throughout a lot of areas, to assist the developer in getting reimbursement for a lot of their early expenses. Those end up being paid for by taxes on those living within that MUD area. Residents of that area will be both within the MUD, and they will also be city residents.
So they'll be paying city taxes, city water, and then MUD taxes?
That would be correct. And so that's why one of the conversations we've had with developers in this case is wanting to know that there's not going to be such a high taxation level in the MUD that it would essentially handicap them in terms of being able to sell to the people in the area. What they do intend to provide, is not just the basics of development there, but additional amenities that go beyond those which are already in the city. And those go back to previous discussions that the council has had, on when they would or wouldn't consider allowing an in-city MUD. Essentially asking questions such as, what is the benefit to the residents of that MUD area if the city would allow it? What are the benefits to the city of allowing the in-city MUD? And what are the benefits to the overall community, that we know as the city of Montgomery towards allowing that in-city MUD?
One of the other things, if I can add, Richard, is, what it helps with, is, the cost of that land, the cost of the infrastructure has to be paid for somehow. So a lot of times, when it doesn't have a MUD or a financing mechanism, that land cost is in your house, is in your lot. And so this helps them be a little bit more competitive when you look, down the street, cross 105, cross 2854, there are MUDs that are existing when it comes to competitive on home prices, et cetera, to hopefully kind of drive up sales and get more residents in.
But hey, Rick, this mud just be between that Players Morgan and Lone Star Parkway, you saying?
Between
Buffalo Spring.
and, I'm sorry, go ahead and finish.
It would be between Players Morgan and Buffalo Spring.
Well, it already exists according to the map that's being shown on the screen in the blue area. It's basically south of 1097, north of Lone Star Parkway, east of Ples Morgan, and west of Buffalo Springs. It's not all of that area in there, but there's a little bit of the area that's near the 1097 on the north part that's not part of the MUD, but most of that area is within the MUD.
So it's just only on the south side of 1097, right?
Yes, sir. This particular MUD, it does not cross 1097.
Okay. All right.
And most MUDs that form, do they normally put a trailer in for their first residence? Like I thought they built a few model homes and someone lived in a model home in order to kick off a MUD. I've never seen I've seen I guess a construction trailer, but never a residential trailer.
That is something that's commonly done. I know there's at least one, and there may be multiple companies that actually contract those services out for MUDs that are in formation.
Richard is correct that it's very typical that they have temporary residents just to get the initial confirmation and bond election passed. And he's exactly right. There are companies that are kind of like a little Airbnb where they set up the residences for people to live there on a temporary basis long enough to qualify as electors to have the MUD elections. And so if there's no other questions now, then as I said before, I just wanted to present this to you as kind of an update item, and we will continue to work with the developer to see which route that may be the best for them and for the city to look to proceed, and then bring that back to council for action. And so then that's all I had for this item.
Thank you, Richard.
With that, is there anything in there's nothing on executive session. Is there anything for council inquiry?
Yes, ma'am. I don't know if the chief is still on or not.
I don't see him.
Okay, well, I just wanted to bring up, see if we could maybe get with text out, or maybe Chris or one of us get with text out and see if we can kind of lower that speed limit between the Shell station and 149. We got a lot of elderly senior people driving out of there, and the people coming through there a little too fast at 55. And that was brought to my attention. See if we could get with them and see if we could lower that speed limit between, because when they come over that hill, it's hard to get out. And I'm a senior too, and I'm living there. So, but I know I got two senior ladies, and they've been complaining about it. So we wanted to bring it to their attention to see if they could lower that, get with them, see if we could lower that speed limit somewhere in between coming over that hill and 149, because it's, like I said, it's traveling. I think it's 55 through there.
Are you talking about the north side of town, TJ? Over by north of 1097?
Yeah, 1097 coming from, even right there where they building those townhomes and stuff coming over that hill. Just kind of see if we can get that. And have you heard anything about them widening 1097 down to 149?
That one did not come up when we last had kind of the overall talk with TxDOT. It was somewhere on their plan, but not soon enough.
Okay. All right.
But I would need to follow up.
But that first concern, though, Chris, that's the one that most of the people have been, I know 3 of them been talking, had concern about, that speed limit.
TJ, on the speed limit there, I know it's been a while, probably at least a year, that has been previously brought up with TxDOT. And so between the chief and I, I guess as well as Chris, we have several contacts there, and we'll follow up to see if they did move forward with that in any way, and whether they did or not, see what either update we can get or what prod we can do to try to move that direction.
Thank you, sir. All right.
Thank you.
Richard, it's Kevin. I just want to tell you that the wall in front of the community center looks great.
Thank you.
Love it.
With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
That Tom making the first and Julie making the second.
That's it.
It has been moved and seconded that we adjourn this meeting. And that motion is debatable. Minimum requires majority vote. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. The ayes have it. The motion carries, and we will adjourn this meeting. It is 7:06 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Have a great Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Bye.